You have stepped into Reader's Labyrinth. And here is your host, Frank Schumpert.
Hello, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It helps me reach a wider audience. Also, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, a 5-star written review goes a long way in making the show stand out. A follow and 5-star rating on Spotify would help propel Reader's Labyrinth to the top of the charts. Thank you. Hello there. I am Frank Schumpert, the host of Reader's Labyrinth, and you are watching on YouTube or Spotify the Monday Morning Drive to Work show. It is Monday, July 31st. Thank you for joining me. Before I jump in and before we get rolling on with this segment in Reader's Labyrinth, I would invite you to hit the pause button. If you are watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, and if you could also click share and go ahead and text this and share it with a friend of yours. This would really help my show grow and for me to reach a wider audience as well. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, then I invite you also to hit the pause button, scroll on down and hit write a review. And I would really appreciate a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. This really helps to encourage me and helps this podcast kind of go out there and earn some street cred, which is always appreciated. And again, for you 18%, according to my Anchor statistics, that are probably not even accurate listeners on Spotify, if you guys could hit that pause button as well, scroll up and hit that 5-star button for rate and review. And also hit follow. Whenever you do this, this lets Spotify know that you are listening to this podcast and you appreciate it. And again, I invite everyone listening, whether you're watching on YouTube, watching/listening on Spotify or on Apple Podcast, if you could, after you leave me a review or like, please reach out to a friend of yours that likes books and share this show with them. I'm sure they would appreciate the many guests I've had on and the wonderful worlds that these authors have spun for our amusement, our entertainment, as well as our sorrow and our laughter. So let's get on with it, this Monday Morning Drive to Work show. First of all, I've gotten several emails from listeners and viewers of Reader's Labyrinth, and some of you guys are from the United Kingdom. A few of you are from Germany, 2 people are from Turkey, and I want to say about 21 listeners are from Australia. I would like to say thank you, and I want to apologize because as of now, when I was recording this show, I haven't seen any Apple reviews come across my feed, but I am restricted to North America only. So if you are a listener based in North America, I can see your review, and I will gladly read it out. However, I've had about 5 or 7, kind of depending on how you count these emails, people reach out to me and ask me if I was going to read their Apple review on the show. But unfortunately, folks, that is not showing up on my end because you do not live in the continental United States or North America. So in an effort to remedy this, what I'm asking you to do is if you do leave a review, please screenshot that for me and send it to me. You can screenshot that review and send it to me at asorrowfullife@gmail.com. That is common spelling. And also, I would like to just hear from you. With that being said, and moving the show on, I would like to ask you, the listeners, about a recent interview and a recent guest I had on here, Yuval Kordov, and his wonderful sci-fi/apocalyptic /mystery thriller. I'm sorry about that. Looks like my studio's falling apart. Mystery thriller, The Hand of God. If you want to, I would really like to know what you thought about that. I've had a couple of emails, some people reach out to me, which is totally awesome. And you can let me know in the comments on the YouTube channel that has the interview with Yuval Kordov, or you can just shoot me an email. I would love to get your feedback on this. Reader's Labyrinth is not the only podcast out there. It's not the only YouTube channel out there. And I would like to give a shout out to 3 shows out there and their creators that I feel that if you get any kind of enjoyment out of Reader's Labyrinth, this tends to be, I'm not going to say an intellectual podcast because that's certainly not what it is, but it tends to be a podcast, according to my listeners, that sticks with them throughout the day. They tend to think about what my guests have said and some of the questions I've had from my authors on here. So I think there are 3 podcasts I have researched. I've reached out to these creators and listened to several of their episodes myself. So when you are not listening to Reader's Labyrinth, I invite you to scroll on down to the show notes on this episode and click the links. You're going to find links to their respective podcast platforms, as well as any website or Twitter feeds that they have. First up on my recommendation and shout out list is going to be Bold Talk by Joe. Bold Talk by Joe. I really like that. It sounds like a character in a Doctor Who book. I don't know, but it kind of stuck out to me. I really enjoy his easygoing, free-form format on there. He lets you know about society and culture. So far, and this is nothing against anything of his episodes, my absolute favorite was episode 97 on finding balance. That is really, really cool. We all need that. Balance between work and life, balance between the creative grind and doing what we really, really like. So I highly recommend it. In fact, I had to share it with a coworker. In fact, I think Joe knows this. I reached out to him and let him know that episode 97 was the hook for me. You will find a link in the show notes to Bold Talk by Joe, and he is up on my list there. Another podcast to be watching, another creator, is a Wrestling World fan. His name is Austin Boyer. His podcast is Wrestling World. And again, that is available on Apple and Spotify. A link in the show notes. I have a best friend of mine, and he is an absolute wrestling fanatic. And although I'm still getting kind of caught up on the intricacies of wrestling was kind of unknown to me, the politics behind it, the commercialism behind it, the marketing, the finances. Austin really, really goes in deep into all of this. So I had to let my best friend, who's a wrestling fanatic, listen to Wrestling World by Austin Boyer. And it got Brooks's mark of and seal of approval. So for that, I'm very, very thankful. And if he can make my really good friend's cut of being a serious wrestling fan, then I know that you will too. I would like to introduce also Stew World Order. This is a creation of a fellow by the name of Robert Stewart. And I'd like to point you out that he has a website, SWO Productions. That is swoproductions.com. Totally, totally cool. What he covers is comic books and more. He covers a whole lot of your kind of movie going, your cinema, your movie politics, the finances behind it. It's an entire world. You see, it's difficult for me to sum up, which is a good thing. That means you need to go and check him out. So there'll be a link in the show notes as well. And he is on Apple and Spotify. I invite you to go check out Stew World Order. So what is next on Reader's Labyrinth? What do I have coming up? Well, I did a very, very short book review. This is not an interview. I did not talk to this author. I've not reached out to this author, but I'm going to start doing some shorter segments where I review a book. And it's going to be a book where the author has either passed away, or the likelihood of me getting the author on the show is going to be very, very low through no fault of the author's own or my fault. But I'm going to start reviewing some books that are going to be kind of more mainstreamy. No, mainstream is a bad term. I don't like that term. I take it back. It is going to be books that have had more of a wider impact. And first off on that list is going to be, I believe it's called The Concise 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Now, I'm going to go ahead and let you know, this is not going to be a rave review of the corpus of Robert Greene. And I'm not going to get too in-depth in this review. I've gotten some questions lately about, hey, Frank, are you going to do a negative review on Reader's Labyrinth? First of all, the short answer to that question is negative. I'm not going to read a book, devote my time to it if I don't like it. If I read a book all the way through, that means that it brought me some type of value. And I'm going to talk about that value on the show, as well as the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there is a lot of ugly with the books written by Robert Greene. And I want to separate the man from his work. He seems like he's a very, very decent human being, a very kind person. And if he was ever in the town of Lexington, I would love to sit down with him and have a beer with him. The beer is on me, Robert. You see, my studio's falling apart. I ordered some cheap sound dampeners off of Amazon, and now they're falling off of my wall. But hey, that's okay. That's what you get. Buy cheap, you get cheap, right? But hey, Robert Greene, if you're ever in the town of Lexington, I will buy you a beer, no hard feelings. And I don't totally rip into your book, and I separate you as a person and as an intellectual from your product, of which I think all of us can learn about the marketing behind it. Anyway, that episode is going to be dropping. If you are listening to this Monday, July 31st, it should be dropping this Wednesday. So you need to go to Spotify and follow, and you need to follow me on Apple Podcasts, or you need to subscribe to my YouTube channel, turn on those recommendations on so you know when this episode drops. As for what am I reading? What are you reading, Frank? Well, I am reading The Way of Unity by Dr. Sarah Balstrap. She is a PhD in religious studies, and I'm still learning about her body of work, and I'm looking forward to having her on the show. I'm already in conversation with her, and it looks like I'm going to be getting her on Reader's Labyrinth. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. And also, I promise you a roundtable with Dr. Sarah, with Andrew, and with Yuval. And they have collectively been known as the Incense Punk Authors. Incense Punk Authors. That's a new one for me. I'm looking forward to having them on and to conversing with all three of them at one time. And as usual, I will have read all of their books on that. So we have covered leaving me a review on Apple, following me and leaving me a rating on Spotify, and we have answered some questions. And what I want to get into right now is I would like to get into, and if you look at the description, you probably see this in the title, but I would like to talk about the recent UAP hearing that was held last Thursday as of the recording of this episode. This was a hearing that was conducted in Washington, D.C. in front of a congressional panel, the subject of which was unidentified aerial phenomenon, which I hate that term. I do not like that term. I like the old school term of UFO, unidentified flying object. I am part of a group of people in this community that thinks that UAP is part of an effort by our military, industrial, and intelligence complex to sanitize the subject, because what they want to do is, I believe that disclosure could be closer than what we really think it is. And I believe that there are certain elements in the government that are trying to sterilize themselves from any kind of legal fallout. If you listen to Jimmy Akin's episode, he has covered a lot on UFOs and specifically on Steven Greer, which I will have a link to this in the show notes. But the military and industrial complexes have been hiding behind top secret security clearances. And I think there's been a whole bunch of illegal activity going on. So I don't think disclosure is going to happen immediately. It's going to be a slow thing. And I think the congressional hearing could be I think a couple of things. First of all, nothing is going to change. There are several people on Twitter, and there's people who I admire, who are intelligent, who think that this was a big deal. The people who think that the congressional hearing about UAPs was a big deal are people who have not been following this phenomenon at least for the past 10 years. I started getting really heavy into the subject in 2004. I've read a bunch of works by Richard Dolan, by Whitley Strieber, by Jeff Kripal, and Jeff Kripal, who I've had on the show, actually. So I'm pretty well versed in the narrative that's going on with UFOs. So my first initial thing is that if you think this is profound, you just have not been following this enough. Or maybe you went on Google, you researched it a little bit, and now, and I'm not trying to sound high and mighty, but if you've never read John Keel, if you've never read any Jeff Kripal, you don't know who Richard Dolan is. If you're not familiar with the people who in a lot of ways have been the, spearheading the research into UFOlogy, then you're going to be easily impressed by the congressional hearing. And as for the congressional hearing, I'm not really going to get into a lot of it, but you had Ryan Graves and David Fravor, both former Navy pilots, who encountered UFOs when they were in service. They saw them flying around their jet aircraft, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that because there's so many flippin' YouTube videos on the subject matter. But I will say this. As witnesses up there in the congressional hearing, I thought that they were pretty credible. Less credible is David Grush. I do not know, pardon my language, I don't know where the fuck he came from. He came out with this outlandish story about crash retrieval programs and bodies and all this. Apparently, most of it is secondhand. I found him completely unremarkable and, to be quite honest, an unreliable witness for the UFO community. And sitting right behind him is the world's favorite Jeremy Corbell. If you ever read a whole lot about high strangeness, you're going to see some common names kind of pop up. I put Jeremy Corbell in the same category as I put in the lowest tier ghost hunters, like these people on TV that just go in there for the sensation. He strikes me as something of a grifter, kind of like that bullshit artist Bob Lazar, which if you think Bob Lazar is credible, like I said, you either got into this 2 years ago or you have not really examined his story. But Frank, hold on a second. Bob Lazar's story never changed, man. His story never changed. No, his story has fucking changed. It has changed numerous times. He has not offered any substantiating evidence, for anything. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to link some videos that totally go into, they investigate. They don't debunk. Debunkers don't believe from the beginning, and they ignore evidence. So this isn't a Bob Lazar debunking video, but I will link some videos in there if you have any doubt about the veracity of Bob Lazar. But Frank, what about Tom DeLonge, Blink 182, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff? Tom DeLonge, I think he's sincere, but I think he is a total tool of intelligence agencies. He brags about the people in government he's been in contact with, and it just kind of reminds me of some of these people that just believe any kind of bullshit that's told to them, so long as it fits a preconceived narrative. I don't detect, and I've watched several podcasts with Tom DeLonge, I don't detect any kind of critical skills thinking. So why am I going into this on Reader's Labyrinth? Frank, this is a podcast where you interview guests that have written books, both fiction and nonfiction. The reason for this is because I'm running across this on Twitter a whole lot, and I would like to have something I can point to and say, hey, if you want to know what I think about Bob Lazar, listen to this. If you want to know what I think about Jeremy Corbell, listen to this. Tom DeLonge, if you want to think and this isn't a definitive, stance on what I think about UFOs or UAPs. That's going to come at a later episode. But what I'm going to leave you with is when I was a teenager, about 16 years old, I used to work at an airport. And when I was working at an airport, they ended up needing an airport manager. So they ended up hiring this guy. Okay, I'm going to call him Brian, is what I'm going to call him. It's not his real name, but, Anyway, Brian claimed to be a retired Air Force vet with 26 years. He was a crew chief, because everyone I talked to in the military says they were a crew chief and they had a security clearance and all that. Anyway, this guy completely bamboozled the hiring commission, the people in charge of hiring him and giving him a job. So Byron went into this job and completely fucked it up. Fuel wasn't ordered. Um, the tires for the golf carts never arrived. I mean, the taxes weren't paid. The airport ended up being fined. Anyway, they ended up calling him to account over and over and over again. And pretty soon, what they figured out was that he had lied about his Air Force service. He had actually served only 3 years and had gotten a general discharge for being a total douchebag. He hadn't served 26 years. They didn't check any of his references. They didn't job check anything. They didn't do anything. And these were a bunch of guys, older guys who were retired military. But Byron got on there. Byron knew the buzzwords to drop in the interview. Byron knew that he could weave a theme into a story that would get him a fucking job. So he went there in front of all these retired military guys, and just completely blew smoke up their ass. But because his story fit a preconceived narrative that these guys had in their heads, they turned their critical thinking skills off. And that's what I'm seeing right now. Bob Lazar, Steven Greer. Steven Greer is probably the worst. Again, Jimmy Akin took him apart. I loved it. But Bob Lazar, Steven Greer, Jeremy Corbell, and I can think of a few others, but I'm just not going to list them. These guys are the Byrons of the world. Okay? They are bullshit artists. They are salesmen. Creeps, even, is what they are in Bob Lazar's case. But Frank, his story never changed, man. I think you need to look into that. Okay. All right. I took a trip to Texas when I was 18 years old, 19 maybe. And if you ask me to prove right now that I took a trip to Texas when I was 19 years old, so this would have been what, in 2002, 2001? I can't remember now. I could come up with some proof, okay? I could get old bank records showing where I'd made purchases in Texas in that time, bank withdrawals in that time. I'm sure I could go and find old tickets up in my attic somewhere, because I think we took like a boat. We went sightseeing. We also went to the Alamo. But what you could do is talk to my family. You could interview. I mean, you could prove that I actually went to Texas when I was 19 years old. But if I told you, well, the government came and they stole all my bank account information, so I couldn't prove it. Well, the government did this. Well, the government did that. That is what you need to look for. When you ask for proof, when you ask for evidence, for substantiating facts out there, you need to ask yourself, okay, is this person pointing to a conspiracy as an explanation for a lack of evidence? If so, you're probably dealing with a bullshit artist. You're probably dealing with the Bob Lazar wannabe, like right in front of you. Alas, I could go on, and I think I've kind of wasted enough of my brain power on this. And in the future, Reader's Labyrinth, I will be having a Thoughts from the Labyrinth segment where I actually go into and I'm going to discuss what I think about the UFO phenomenon, because I think it's a real phenomenon. I do not believe that Ryan Graves or David Fravor, these former Navy pilots, are lying. I believe they are being truthful. They have firsthand account information. And the UFO community loves to say that for a jury trial, like if you're going to a criminal case, that anecdotal evidence and eyewitness testimony is admissible and can lock someone up. But what these people are forgetting is the last part is a character analysis. Witness testimony isn't going to put anyone in prison, even if they saw the guy murder everybody, if that person is a repeated, multiple proven liar. That part, when the UFO community brings up, well, witness testimony, man, I mean, it's actually good. You need to bring up the character part, because Bob Lazar, Steven Greer, and Jeremy Corbell, they fucking fell at that. Period. As Jimmy Akin says, they are liars, lying who lie. So, anyway, to sum up, the congressional hearing is not a historical event, despite what your friends who just started studying UAPs, UFOs think. 2, I don't like the term UAPs, even though I use it. I think it's the government trying to awash some legal protection against it, which means that disclosure might be happening against our will. I don't know. And last but not least, watch out for the bullshit artists. And I do think the UFO phenomenon could be something real, although as Whitley Strieber's late wife Anne said, it has something to do with death. That is what I think, a spiritual matter. Dr. Jeffrey Kripal interview is something we're checking out. Anyway, I apologize. I apologize for this long, rambling rant on UFOs at the very end, but I had to get that off of my chest. And I hope you stick with me moving forward. I hope you enjoy the book review I did on Robert Greene. That's going to be dropping this Wednesday again. And if you have any thoughts at all, shoot me an email. You can reach me at asorrowfullife@gmail.com. That is asorrowfullife@gmail.com. Thank you so much for stopping by.